It looks like Mary is here and unmuted. It looks like, oh, actually, oh, Abishaw's still getting connected.
Okay.
Oh, there's Abishaw. Okay. And the other one I moved was David Gomberg, and there you are. So I think we're all set.
Okay, great. All right, so good morning, or good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Yamhill County Roundtable. I posed some questions to panelists earlier, but I'd really like you, again, mainly to talk to the people in the community. And a reminder to please mute yourself if we haven't muted you. We will make sure to have Director Lindsay Manfrin on next Tuesday so we can hear more updates from a public health perspective. And I want to welcome Celia Nunez from the Small Business Development Center. I'm pretty sure I got that right. And so we'll hear an update from her as well and what she would like to talk to small business owners in the county about. So the questions that I raise for folks to consider and talk about include both the public health response, the business recovery response, and the unemployment issues. And I would love to get started with Representative Noble, since I started with Representative Gomberg last week, and despite the wonderful beard contest. So Representative Noble, what would you like to tell people this week, and welcome?
Thank you. I'm glad to be able to join you today. This week is a little bit of a change. We've seen both the governor and the White House come out with a plan for reopening, either reopening Oregon or reopening America, which I think is good. And both plans talk about moving cautiously. I think any plans that we come up with, or as we begin to open up and track health issues as well, to ensure that we're not opening up too early, we need to do so in such a way that has the fewest number of regulations, or the fewest amount of regulations, or I guess from a different way of saying it, the least amount of government interference as we get back to what our new normal is. However, not forsaking that which is important to ensure the health and safety of all of us. We also need to get back to business. I can't say business as usual because I don't think it's going to be it's not going to be the way it was. It'll be a new normal because we have some issues, I think, as everybody knows, with our state unemployment system and catching up and trying to get money out to people. That's going to be with us for a little while. Anybody who's having difficulty, feel free to call my office and we will help you through that process. But obviously it's got some problems and it's going to take a while to get that fixed. The Paycheck Protection Plan or the PPP, the dollars are gone until the federal government reallocates more money. So as we're moving into this new era, we need to make sure that we're taking care of our working families, we're taking care of our small businesses, and something that sometimes is forgotten are farmers and ranchers and some of the issues that they are facing now and going to be facing as we move into growing and harvest season, and how we get that food from the field into the store. So I guess my main message is as we're transitioning, we need to, one, stay optimistic. We need to be careful. We can't be reckless with our physical distancing and all the new things that we've come to appreciate in hand washing and sanitation and just keeping some distance. But we need to try and get back to work the best we can in a smart and wise way. And I appreciate both the governor and the president's outlines of how we're going to do that. So it looks like we have a bunch of people online, and I'll turn that over to someone else now. Thank you, Casey.
Thank you very much, Representative Noble. And I wanted to ask, what are the issues with farmers? But we'll save that for another, because I hear some and you hear some. So, well, with that, what I'd also like to do is, since Celia Nunez is actually here new, I'd love to give her the opportunity to speak to small business owners and employees and entrepreneurs in the area, and also do a bit of an introduction to who she is and what she does. So Celia, if you don't mind going second.
Absolutely. Thank you,
Thank you.
Commissioner. I appreciate it. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to meet you, and it's great to see so many friendly faces and actually see faces of some of our elected. So it's great to know that you're so involved. I am the very proud director of the Chemeketa Small Business Development Center and have been there for a few years. We, of course, service the Mid-Valley area, which includes Marion, Polk, and Yamhill. We've been incredibly busy, and from the get-go, we've been able to provide many business owners with some support. But I want to be able to give you a little bit of a highlight in regards to, if you're not familiar with SBDCs, what we provide. So from a high-level overview, we are here to provide at no cost advising to small business owners for issue specific. We're not consultants, and we don't bring them along as far as doing work for them, but we're here to support when they need us. We provide classes, whether it be classes, programs, workshops, and this is where some of the work that we're doing falls into place. There's other services as well, but for the sake of the conversation, I'd like to be able just to end there and then answer any questions. One of the things that we've been doing that's starting to really show some support is we have been offering navigating through the COVID crisis webinars. Hopefully a few of you have seen the link to those. We just had our first and are planning our second. And what we're starting to see from small business owners is they really don't want to have us have a presenter to talk about the programs, whether it's the economic injury disaster loan or the PPP, unless it's new information per se. They really are at a point where they want their questions answered. It's been interesting. Last week was very stressful because we had a lot of people who were calling, or we're providing, by the way, all our advising either by phone, email, or virtually, including our classes and the webinars we're offering, so you know. But I've seen the shift from their very high, lots of anxiety and really hoping to get their applications in and a lot of worry, to this week, a lot of the concerns are they're actually contacting us for very specific questions. They want clarification for their own personal situation. So we're getting questions like, if I accept this money, what are my tax consequences? What if I hire part of my team and not the other part? What if I offer money and they don't accept the offer, etc.? Going back to the webinars, it so happened yesterday when we had the webinar, of course, we received the announcement from the SBA. One of the things that we have the luxury of is Marty Golden, who is the SBA director for the PAC Northwest, or for Oregon per se. He works with our Capital to Access advisors. So on our calls, we have 2 of our Capital Access advisors providing information and answering questions. And even though we were able to share with them that there was no more money, our attitude with them is this, is we have full faith in our elected officials and really are working towards having business owners not lose faith and continue with their process of applying for a PPP or the EIDL, so they're prepared when the new relief package comes to fruition. We're also trying to provide all of our services, so all of you know, in Spanish. So starting next week, we're going to do webinars in Spanish, and we have a team of outreach that's taking place even in Yamhill County. I've worked with Commissioner Kula on that just recently. So that's just giving you kind of a little highlight. I hope that provides you with a little bit of background on what we're doing and our efforts. So thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Celia. Does anybody have questions for Celia, or do we want to circle back if we have time at the end? All right, I don't have any in my comments, my chart here, so thank you very much. And I want to make sure that Abhishek Stone from SEDCOR, who is Yamhill County's economic development contractor, to have enough time to talk about the immediate relief grant program, but I also want to observe a little of that like protocol about how there's a senator on the phone. And wait a minute, is he still? Okay, yes, there he is. Sorry to find. And so I'm going to go to the senator first. So we'll do a little bit of elected and business back and forth. So Senator Roblin, what would you like to tell people both in the community, at the coast even, and here on the Zoom?
Yeah, we're keeping engaged. I had a meeting. I'm on the Economic Advisory Committee for the governor, along with a lot of business and labor people. We had a meeting this morning in which Nick outlined the full program that the governor is putting in place in line with the president's idea of how we get back to business. And so we're going to be breaking into 5 different subgroups, including restaurants, sport, other kinds of big events, transit, all the different subgroups, and trying to come up with how do we get back safely in each of those different subgroups. So I really appreciate the governor and this work group continuing to dig down deeper into what it means to come back. The big issue is, as you know, we need to have more testing so we actually understand where it is in our communities. We need to have more PPE. We've had that conversation since I've been here. We're getting better, but it still is not there. Everybody knows, including that group, that hospitals have to be getting back into doing regular business because we need to get them financially supporting themselves. So that means general operations and so on. That's really a PPE issue right now. But PPE is also the issue for opening up some of these businesses and other kinds of things. And I think there is a good framework for the plan. I talked about it last week with her 5 plans. She's now moved that in alignment with what the president's group came out with yesterday. I'm excited about that. I'm excited about the involvement of different people. I was also on a meeting this morning with I'm on the Grand Round Foundation. And so we were out trying to figure out how do we help people and communities around in the 11 county area that their foundation works with. So we are gearing up and getting ready to meet the needs of communities in our areas. And Yamhill obviously is one of those counties. So continue to keep working and finding out what's going on next. We're having a caucus meeting later today. I think that's going to be talking about whether we're going to have a e-board coming up in the near future or not. We'll find out more about that as time goes on. I don't anticipate having a special session again until we have the financial report coming out in May, the May 5 forecast. The governor is finding ways. You just got yesterday the outline of materials that she's been working with the counties and the cities governments to figure out how to go about doing your business with respect to budgets and so on. And hopefully, if there's anything that those don't cover that you need to get that in quickly, either through any one of your legislators or to the governor's office directly about issues that you aren't quite sure about. But they work that out with all of the different groups, special districts, AOC, and the counties and the cities. So I hope that answers some of the questions we've been waiting for quite a while. But recognize that people are working really, really hard to try to get going. Yesterday we had a call regarding unemployment insurance and all of the issues that they've had around that. They're continuing to work. They are trying to get up to 800 people to start out with 100. But the 6-week training it took to get people online, they've now got down to 2 days. So getting new people takes time, and it still doesn't help those people that haven't got their checks. We hope we can continue to improve on the timeline on that one, and be glad to answer any questions and be available. But rest assured, everybody is working as hard as they can, and it's sometimes you watch and it looks like the duck floating along, and you don't see anything happening, but you don't understand what's going on underneath the water. And there's a lot of stuff going on underneath the water right now. So just want to give you that. And
yeah, amen. It looks like Joya Goodrum from the McMinnville Chamber has a question for you, Senator.
Sure.
Hi there, thank you. Senator, could you tell me, we have a company here in McMinnville that is making surgical grade masks, and they cannot figure out how to get them to market. They have called the state, they have called hospitals. They are struggling to get these masks out, and we hear that everybody needs PPE, and yet we can't put them together.
What I would tell you is the contact that we go through is Horner at the governor's office, and that if you get a hold of the people who are running our emergency services at the state level, they should have an answer for that. The question, would be, is that material that the state's going to buy? Is that going to be stuff that individual hospitals are going to buy? And I think they could answer that question for you. Getting it into one of the streams of flowing so that they can get it going is really important. And but I would start with the governor's office and see how to go from there. And if you haven't had any success, get back to us, send us an email. We'll try to figure out an answer for you.
I will do that. Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate the response.
Joya, also a name is Sonia McCormick, who updates at the state level for Office of Emergency Management.
That's a good group. Yeah.
Yes, and I was
Thank you,
just
Mayor
on,
Hill.
I was just on the AOC weekly conference call, and the Andrew Phelps, the director of emergency management, did note that hospital systems and clinics should expect to have a secondary source of personal protective equipment from the state sources. And I thought that was a good reminder that folks like companies in Yamhill County need to also be working directly with health systems.
Yep.
It was an eye opener and a good reminder. Other questions for the senator? It looks like maybe Commissioner Starrett has a question.
No, I don't.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sorry. All right. Thank you very much, Senator. And Abhisha Stone, would you like to go next and explain to folks whatever you'd like to tell people in Yamhill County?
You bet. Thank you, Commissioner Kula. Thank you for everybody being on this call. I always appreciate your knowledge and insight. So the first thing I wanted to share is that the Yamhill County Board of Commissioners did approve $250,000 for use in immediate relief grant funding program to aid small businesses. These will be issued in $2,500 grant increments. We did take a population-based county-wide allocation approach so that each community will have access to some of these grant funds. Equitable access and distribution is a really big priority for the Board of Commissioners, and I appreciate that they were keeping that in mind as looking at how these funds would be distributed. So the program is currently available in terms of access on the county website. You will find information about the program and a link. That link will go live this coming Monday, the 20th at noon, and will be open until noon on the 23rd, accepting applications. Applicants will go through a qualifying questionnaire to determine whether or not they're eligible for the grants. If they're eligible, they'll move on to a short application. It's a very simple process. I'm telling folks that it's about a 10 to 15 minute application process. We also added a question at the end of this application, which is a voluntary question. It's not a part of the application, but the intent is to collect some data. So we're asking our businesses what they see coming for their industry in particular, and what needs they see ahead of them, and how the county and the state might be able to help serve that need. So we're trying to collect a little bit more information to help us prepare what those next stages of support might look like for our businesses. We expect that we will be doing a committee review. So we have a committee together, excuse me, to review that process. We'll be doing that review on the 24th and submitting a recommendation to the Board of Commissioners, which they will be viewing at their April 30th meeting. Coming out of April 30th, if a decision is made, then we expect those checks to be cut and distributed by May 14th. So a 2-week turnaround to help get the administrative process done. But if it can be done sooner, they'll get out even sooner. So if you do the quick math, we'll be issuing 100 grants throughout the county. And I'm happy to answer any questions either now or later via email if you have any. Many of you did receive that information in the press kit directly. Hi. We did also translate the portions of the press release into Spanish and have been sharing that with the Latinx radio stations locally as well. So hoping to really get as far reach about this grant program as possible. I wanted to also share that SEDCOR, in partnership with other regional economic development service providers such as the Council of Governments and Willamette Workforce Partnership, are working to try to identify additional funds for a regional recovery effort. So the next step of this, and looking to use and leverage funds that are currently being made available by particularly Yamhill County and Marion County through these grant programs to try to attract additional funding for our region. So more to come on that, but I just wanted to at least share with this group that that's work that we're trying to do to again leverage what we're already doing, but to make sure we're taking a regional approach to bringing more resources to the area.
Can I ask a question, Abisha?
Sure.
On those county grants, I'm sorry about this. I am paying attention. On those county grants, is there like kind of a threshold for proof of economic impact, and what might that look like? You know, if there's financial records needed or anything like that.
Thank you for that question, Mayor Wojtowski. So we're not asking for people to submit records. It's a little too burdensome, I think, for our businesses. And also we do expect a really high response rate. Marion County, for example, who just issued their grant program, received over 1,000 applications in less than 24 hours. Our application process will be open for 72 hours. We do have a few qualifying questions, as I was mentioning, and one of them is whether or not the business is under a mandatory change in service or closure order. And so we're making the assumption that if the business has been affected by a mandatory change in service or closure order, that they have a significant impact.
Can I ask a follow-up question on the closure order?
Sure.
Of course, in my head is my family's business, which is, and we have a nursery that my family's been operating for almost 100 years, and we were not ordered to change anything other than to provide for social distancing. But my family, because my grandmother is 82 and the sole proprietor, has gone to curbside only, which has essentially almost eliminated retail sales and very significantly changed operations. But it's not under mandatory order. So would her business type not be eligible?
Are you talking about an agricultural nursery?
Yes.
Mayor, I always appreciate your questions because they're so thoughtful. I want to let you know that we also included in this grant special consideration industry partners, and there's two of them. One of them is non-essential agriculture businesses that have been immediately impacted, which is where that type of a business would fall. So non-essential agriculture meaning non-food ag. And the reason why we included that group is because especially at the time of issuance, because things change on an hourly basis, there were no resources available for funding for those types of businesses. We also included manufacturers who are retooling in order to provide for emergency PPE service, emergency PPE materials, because again, there was no funding available. Yet the request was really high of these folks, and obviously in order to diversify their own business, it's just a smart thing to do, but a great need without any funding. So those two particular business types have special consideration for this grant. Yeah, thank you for asking that question.
Do you have other questions for Abisha before she moves on to her next points? Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Abisha. Sorry.
Okay. That's okay. Senator Roblin already mentioned that these industry-specific groups are coming together in order to identify some best practices for specific industries to start the process of reopening. And I really appreciate that work that your team is doing and that those groups of folks are doing. We will be, SEDCOR and other regional partners like ourselves will be partnering with those groups to help make that connection between whatever those best practices are decided and the actual industries themselves to help them deploy those efforts. This also goes to the next part of, Joya had brought up the concern about businesses that have material resources that are not being connected to the right partners to make sure that those PPE materials get out. So part of the next step of this is, first of all, identifying, for example, what would restaurants need for their employees in regards to PPE in order to be able to reopen. The second part of that is, where do they get it? Right? So where do they get access to those things, especially if there's any competition with the medical industry, which none of us want to see happen. So because there have been some gaps, and we've identified there have been some gaps in connecting the need to the supplier, we are currently looking at ways that we can help to bridge that gap and maybe create for lack of a better term, kind of that online dating portal, if you will. So we need this and we have this, right? So here are the suppliers of these materials and matching it to the needs of those materials. That is early in development, and I think there's a few groups looking to do that. I've said a few times already that our state partners are doing a great job. Many of them are being forced to wear hats they never even tried on, and doing a lot of work all at once. And the footwork under the water, Senator Roblin, I appreciate that analogy as well, because that's exactly what's going on here. So SEDCOR and other partners are trying to figure out how we can help to streamline that. We're currently doing that in one-offs. So Joya, for example, we do have a list of those local emergency service providers, hospitals, clinics, and the direct contact person for purchasing those materials. And we've been trying to share those out to our manufacturers, but we can make that easier for everyone. And I think that's probably enough from me. So thank you. I really appreciate everybody's time.
Thank you very much, Abisha. I think that I'm not sure if I actually remembered to thank you in our last meeting when we, gave updates about the immediate grant program. So thank you for moving so quickly and for being really comprehensive about it. Are there any questions for Abisha before we move on? Okay, great. Thank you very much. Representative Gomberg, what would you like to tell folks, and how long is your beard today?
Well, it's just a couple of days longer than last time we spoke. Thank you. Senator Roblin gave a good overview of what's going on at the Employment Division. I just want to continue to emphasize that that they are urging people to email rather than to phone. And if anybody needs that email address, I can post that to the chat section. But we're being told now that they are starting to catch up on this huge backlog. They have added 400 new employees. They started out with 100. They've added 400. They plan to add 400 more. That gives you a sense of the scope of their challenge. And if people email, they should expect a response within 4 to 5 days. So keep that in mind. I see some chamber managers on the call here. Chambers out at the coast have been surveying their members, and perhaps that's been going on in the valley as well. And one of the things they're asking is how many of these companies expect that they are going to be able to survive the current environment. And they're being told that between 20 and 30 companies do not expect to reopen. That's pretty daunting news, which is why the steps that are being taken at the federal level and the state level are so very, very important. And a group of bipartisan legislators are going to be meeting at 2 o'clock today to start talking about what steps Oregon can take to try and help people get back to work. We touched briefly on the PPP dollars that have been used up, but there are more of them on the way. One of the messages I've been taking to our federal delegation is my frustration that the amount that you qualify for is based largely on how many employees you had in January. Now, if you're in agriculture, if you're in fisheries, or if you're in tourism, you don't have as many employees in January as you do in July or August. And I think that's problematic. So I don't know if we can fix that, but we can continue to deliver the message. And then shifting over from PPP to PPE, the personal equipment, the question had been asked about how we can, if we've got stuff, how do we sell it to people that need it? And the state does have a portal where you can submit your information, and they are kind of vetting people, trying to sort out the ones that are real and quality versus some that might not be as real or as quality. And I'm going to try and look that up and post that into the chat section as well.
I do want to say, because Representative Gomberg had pushed this, and you had asked the other day about why don't they go 24-hour a day on the employment agency? Well, they share a mainframe with 3 or 4 other agencies, and their information has to coalesce together. So that happens at night. And so they've pushed them and gotten 2 extra hours on both ends, an earlier and a later. But there is a time when the computer has to adjust all the stuff that's been going on in the day to make it all whole. And so they can't go to the 24-hour. They have, I think it was a suggestion from either Betsy or somebody else, Johnson, that they might be able to keep their phone lines open later and maybe in the middle of the night, but they won't be able to put the information in while they're taking the phone call. So that's kind of an answer to why they don't go 24 hours a day.
And it looks like Abby Shastone has a question for you along those lines.
Thank you, Commissioner. Representative Gomberg, the response that I've gotten back about the state portal is that the response to industry partners is very slow. And I believe it probably is due to kind of the comments I made before about folks being overtaxed, a new systems being set up, and probably lack of staffing. Are you aware of those concerns and or even more importantly, aware of any efforts to streamline that, to speed that up, or to improve it in general?
Good question. By the way, I just did post that link to the chat section. I've heard this concern, and I'm not hearing any ready answers to it, except that they are working on it. And I suspect that it's because they too are being flooded with proposals and trying to sort them out.
Thank you.
Are there questions about that from our business leaders here? Okay. Anything more, Representative Gomberg? Okay. Great. Thank you very much. Then what I'd like to do is to keep on that order of business and elected officials. I'd love to ask Shannon Buckmaster at the Chehalim Chamber to what she would like to tell people in the business community and employees.
Thank you. And thank you to everybody who chooses to be part of this call on a recurring basis. The information is really critical. And I'm proud to be able to represent the messages that you bring that we can get to our business partners. Most of the updates that I planned on covered had already been covered. So the return to the work, reopening, and what the coordination is between the state and the federal. What I can add to that is that industries are creating specific guidelines for business owners to start working on now in advance of the official word coming out. So we know that there's going to be an emphasis on PPE. So how are you equipping your staff? And that's, looking at things like plexiglass and masks and gloves. That could also be creating a business plan in your facility to mark areas, either visual markers on the wall or reminders like the tape spaces. This is 6 feet apart, because we know even for the return to work or return to public spaces, we'll still be practicing social distancing as well. It would be great if we could get some more official timeline estimates from the state level. Of course, you have a lot of nonprofits who are event-centric or relying on those events. You have the hospitality and tourism industry wanting to know what they can expect from tourism season. There's a lot of uncertainty. Do they start planning for May? Do they plan for July? Are we looking at a slow and gradual release that will continue through the fall? And even if we don't have specific dates, it would be really helpful to have those general estimates. I think people got so excited that they might get out of their house and get a hug that they're expecting within a couple of weeks. All the front doors are going to open wide, and we're going to be back out into the community. So if we could have clear messaging, that would be really helpful. And then also, I wanted to share that the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation has partnered with Vistaprint to release a small business grant. It's the Save Small Business Fund. This is a $5,000 grant to a small business. The application is open April 20th online at savesmallbusiness.com. So that's savesmallbusiness.com, all one word. This is for companies that employ between 3 and 20 businesses. So especially in our communities, those are some of the most vulnerable businesses that we're seeing, the businesses who are at very high risk of not coming back from this. They must be located in an economically vulnerable community, and there's a zip code tracker on their website. I did take the liberty to check all 10 incorporated cities in Yamhill County, and plus a couple cities that were our immediate neighbors. I can tell you that the cities in Yamhill County who are eligible by zip code to apply for this grant include Lafayette, Newburgh, McMinnville, Sheridan, Amity, Willamina, Dayton, and Grand Rod. The cities that are not eligible because they are considered too prosperous per capita are Dundee, St. Paul, Carlton, and Yamhill. So we still have an opportunity for most of our cities. These businesses must also have been harmed financially by the COVID-19 pandemic. It's a very short application. All businesses need is the W-9 for their company. The grants are going to be awarded on a weekly rollout basis. You only apply once, but as they're adjusting and as they're processing the application, funds will be released every week. So those are my updates.
Great, thank you very much, Shannon. Do folks have questions for Shannon Buckmaster right now?
I would ask a kind of similar question that I asked Apasha, which is, do you have any idea at this point what proof of that economic harm would look like?
I think it's a self-selected question. So at this point, we have a very generous, large corporation, Vistaprint, partnering with the Chamber of Commerce to provide some sort of a national relief. So they wanted to make sure the process was very simple. I'm sure that's so that they don't overwhelm their staffing and their capacity as well, as we're seeing. So moving forward, the other guidelines, I think they just really want to see that smallest tier of businesses succeed.
Great. And Shannon, one thought I had, you talked about it would be really nice to have some general, like some rough timelines for different parts of it. And I keep coming back to the list of the 5 milestones or prerequisites that the governor laid out. Senator Roblin, Senator Gomberg, Representative Gomberg, Senator Roblin, and Representative Noble are obviously all going to be involved in those different kind of communities. But when I look down the list, I do see that we're making progress on different aspects, and that's really heartening to me. And I know that each of us in our own piece is actually working on some piece of that right now and speeding that along, which is really heartening to me.
If I could, excuse me, Senator.
I was going to tell you that they are trying to figure out the daily updates that come out along those same lines, so you can see by region and county whether you're meeting some of those guidelines, i.e. the decline in numbers, the number of beds you have available. All of those things are going to be part of that deal, and I think they're going to try to design the webpage so you can see more clearly if your region is meeting those step-down things that have to happen. But I guess what I would say is that as told to us every time we get in some of these meetings, the timeline is totally dependent on something we're not dependent on, and that's the virus. So if we're seeing declines, then we have a chance, but then we have to make sure we have some of these other things in place. But we agree, we would love to have some kind of better understanding of the timelines. And I think the new guidelines that are going to come out are going to be better at that than the ones before. And I do think that in this state, you'll see a regional deployment as different regions get ready for it, but we have to be careful that we don't invite the other region in that has a problem. So figuring all that stuff out is really important.
I had one more comment, and it was exactly what you addressed, Senator, that we're expecting a release by industry and possibly a release by geography as we really address the fact that COVID-19 has affected different parts of the state differently. And so a release may come much sooner, say in southeastern Oregon than it would in the Portland metropolitan area. And that was confirmed by the governor's regional solutions team this morning. So thank you.
That's right. Those are really good comments. Thank you very much. Senator, do you have any follow-up comments before I move on? Okay.
No.
Great. Thank you very much. Now I'd like to move on to back into the elected official world. And Commissioner Sterrett, what would you like to tell folks, both in the community and here on the call?
Thanks, Commissioner, and thank you for everybody for these updates during the week. Just found out, we're all in denial about how these budget issues are going to affect our pet projects, and we've got sort of an issue not knowing whether DHS is going to be able to follow through with a particular project that we had worked on. So we're still waiting to hear that. Their DHS is going to have some significant budget issues, and it's not known at this point just how that will affect what we've done, and you all know that we've gotten together quite an aggressive program to move forward with more collaboration with child welfare issues. So we're just waiting to hear. We've got somebody ready to hire, and that was part of a project and an ask that we're very proud to get. And I want to thank Jordan Robinson for the work that he did on that. So we're just waiting, and our fingers are crossed, and hope we can follow through and take that across the finish line.
Great. Thank you very much, Commissioner. Do we have any questions for Commissioner Sterrett? Okay. Thank you. Then I'd like to move to back into the business world to Joya Goodrum from the McMinnville Chamber of Commerce. And then after that, we'll go to Commissioner Olson.
Okay, hi, everybody. Great to see you again. Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, our elected officials and everybody else on the call. Appreciate seeing all of you. I'll be really brief. The Treasury, I believe, came out with a Main Street program, grant program for businesses with 500 to 10,000 employees. I'm not sure. I don't think of Main Street as having a business on it with 10,000 employees, but whatever. That is available and that is out there, and we'll be sending information out to our members about that as well. We did hear about the EIDL and the PPP being unfunded, although there is talk. I was on a call this morning with the U.S. Chamber and Inc. magazine, and they were talking about that they really do think that we might be getting some money in the PPP coming next week if both sides can come to a place of understanding and what they would like to see happen. So we're hoping that that'll come back. And also there's talk about the EIDL being refunded at some other time. We are working the Stable Table, which is our economic development organizations. We are working on a path back or path forward program. It's just in the talking phases right now, but we think we have a way that we can bring a bunch of people together and figure out what we all need as a community, and then make sure that we have that so we can move forward. And next week, we are hosting a Zoom with Representative Noble for our members. And then we've also invited to a separate meeting, Mayor Hill and Jeff Towery, our city manager, and I saw Adam this morning, Adam Garvin, and so we've asked him to join us as well. And then we're doing a Women in Business via Zoom, which is going to be fun to connect with our women and talk about self-care and what we need to be doing to, you know, really take care of ourselves during this period. And of course, we're doing greeters as well, and that's been a lot of fun. I have a write-up that I had sent to our board that was basically Governor Brown's path forward, and I'll be happy to share what I have. But I do have a question. I've heard about the cat tax and that the governor had asked schools to not hire any more educators, and I just wondered where we were with that, because there are people who are asking to either postpone the cat or at least maybe not require people to pay the first 2 quarters because it could put them into some kind of economic crisis. We know that the state needs the money. We know education needs the money, but what are we going to do? How are we going to make this move forward? And I will mute myself. Thank you very much.
So I'll take a stab at Kat. We haven't had a session, so there's nothing we can do that. If they, my understanding is, I have not seen a edict from the governor or anybody, but that revenue is not planning on giving anybody fines or whatever, depending on how they do it. So moving forward, that's the one thing I've heard. It has not been given out directly, but that's an understanding that I think most of us have. Many of the businesses that are going to be affected aren't going to be having $1 million in sales, so their estimate should be less than that anyway, because you don't pay anything until the first million. And so factor that into your figuring, and I think most people are going to recognize that estimating right now is a ridiculous thing to try to do given what's happening with people. So that, coupled with the idea that I don't think they have indicated that they are going to have any fines for people filing late or missing their estimates. So I think that's pretty much what is in the works right now. So again, it's on sales, and so if they aren't selling anything, they're not going to. They shouldn't be having an estimate that makes it worse. But that's the last I've heard. There has not been any formal action taken. It certainly was part of our joint committee's conversation about trying to figure out how to do it and how to make sure that those businesses that have those high volumes but need cash flow can keep going. And Amazon and some of these others that are making more money than they've ever made should pay their tax. So that was part of the conversation we had.
Senator, do you ever see that changing from like 1 million to 5 million or 10 million in sales instead of $1 million?
At some
Just out of
point,
curiosity.
that's going to take a session or something to deal with, because the governor can't do that, and we can't do it when we're sitting out here waiting for a session. So
Cool. Thank you very much. I appreciate your help. Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you very much. And thanks for taking that question on. Representative Noble, do you want to add to that at all, or how are you good with letting it be?
I think it was answered very well. I know that it was a lot of the discussion during the joint committee. There's been a lot of back and forth and trying to figure out who's truly harmed based on sales. So I appreciate the senator's answer. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And thank you, Joya, for that question. At this point, I'd love to move on to Commissioner Olson. I believe that's my order. Commissioner Olson, what would you like to tell folks both here and in the community?
Thank you, Casey, and welcome everybody. If you can hear me now. I'd like to welcome everybody. I'm sorry I wasn't at the AOC call in this morning because I had two others I had to be on, but you know, we all know during these troubled times that everybody's on supposed to be on multiple ones at the same time. But I want to talk about is I was on a conference this morning with Business Oregon, Danny Houle at Business Oregon, and there was Commissioners Willis and Cameron from Marion County and myself. Unfortunately, somebody from the tribe could not be available. And during that call, we seem to keep coming up with the same issues that every other conference call has been on. One is the PPP funding. Number two is the difficulty businesses are having dealing with the SBA and dealing with banks. The third was support for the lack of support for farmers and allocation of funds to directly support farmers and farm industries. And the thing about it is that, excuse me, one of the questions that was asked, we asked Denny Houle from Business Oregon to work with the governor's office. There's some concern that how the first batch of PPP money was allocated was really kind of, I want to say, predetermined. So the commissioners, what the commissioners of three asked for is an allocation of, number one, how it was distributed and where it was distributed, to make sure that that PPP money was going over all the state, not to just the major metropolitan area, which a lot of the commissioners feel that they were really the ones, that it was predetermined. And then the other thing is the governor's plan to open the state was talked a lot. It was a group of all the commissioners who believed that it should be based on the outbreak and not based on what's going on in the metropolitan area, because it seems like we felt that a lot of the rules being written for reopening the state were based mostly on the metropolitan area and not the areas in Eastern Oregon or Southern Oregon, in Polk counties like Lincoln and Polk and Yamhill County. So we encouraged them to do that. Then the other thing we discussed was the fairs, and that working with the legislature to come up with additional funding for the fairs. Because as you know, the fairgrounds, like in McMinnville, the fairgrounds are not just to hold the fair. The biggest part of it is events, and fairs is just a very small part of our, in the state of Oregon, small county fairs are losing money. They're losing money left and right. Matter of fact, two of the small counties, and I can't remember which one they're looking at not even doing a fair because they don't have the money to open up the fairgrounds, actually do a fair. So that was critical. But other than that, that was the one that was really concerning, was those particular issues which we've touched on. So that's all I have, Dad, Casey.
Great. Thank you very much, Commissioner Olson. And I think maybe you have a nice
So I'm
bird
done.
song. Commissioner Olson, do you have a really nice bird song behind you, or is that Commissioner Stare?
Must be Commissioner Starrick. Though it be all mine are just peasant specials. I don't have any birds.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much, Commissioner Olson. Mayor Potter of Yamhill, what would you like to tell people this week or this Friday, and both in your community and here on the phone line or the video line? And thank you for joining us.
I'm glad to be here. Thanks for inviting me. We're preparing an information and resource newsletter that we'll be putting out early next week to the entire Yamhill community and giving them some information and resources. We're also working on the budget, and I wanted to let people of Yamhill community know that they are welcome to participate in the budget process, and we will be holding budget meetings that they can come to. We are doing it virtually though, so they would need to get the information off the Yamhill website, the City of Yamhill website, for that information. And one last thing is, I just wanted to, you asked what people could do, and I wanted to let my neighbors in Yamhill know that they can support their community best by checking on their neighbors and making sure that they have all that they need and that they have access to what they need. And if they don't, they can, and they don't know, they need resources on where to find stuff, that they can call City Hall and we'll make sure they get resources to find the things that they need.
Great. Thank you very much, Mayor. And thank you for your work. Yeah, I'm glad that you have so much experience with guiding people through crises.
Quite a bit. Yeah. Thank you.
I'm glad. Okay, but let's go on to another mayor then. Mayor Witowski of Dayton, what would you like to tell people? And again, thank you for organizing all of us here and sharing your Zoom account.
I don't really think I have any major new announcements. I mean, this week has been wading through new documents from ODE. And of course, I'm trying to help with my family's nursery and look at lots of economic recovery things to try to keep my grandmother's business afloat, which is a struggle right now for sure. But I don't think I have anything new to my community other than I'll say something that maybe will be a little controversial, so then you'll all not want me on these calls anymore. But one thing I'll say, don't cover your eyes, Casey. One thing I will say, is, you know, I really hope that my children can stay out of this room for 30 seconds, but I really hope that, you know, our residents of our cities and our counties are able to kind of get past and get through some of the divides I'm seeing. I'm sure that a lot of you are seeing. You know, we have lots and lots of partisan issues, and things seem really deeply divided. It doesn't seem to me that response to a pandemic should be nearly as partisan as it seems to be. And so I just really hope that, you know, the folks on the calls, the leaders in the communities, and that our residents will try to look with discerning eyes at data and information that we see, and will read, you know, read for content, articles that come out, and kind of carefully scrutinize the media that we do use to get information, and try to see, you know, the best information for making decisions in our own families, and regarding our own behaviors, but also the information that we share on social media, and advise other people with. I think there's a lot of really promising data about Oregon right now, but it doesn't mean that we're done and that we're safe yet either. And I just really hope that people try to see, you know, see reality through some of the lines. And they're not necessarily just partisan lines either. I mean, sometimes they're just groups of people that have decided one thing or another. But I hope we remember that, you know, we get through this together. And we're going to need to be able to work together when we get out of this as well.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much, Mayor. I think that was maybe more of a like bringing people together than a dividing comment that you made. I just want to put that out there. Yeah, and I really appreciate that. I do find myself when I'm writing something on Facebook or sending a message, a text or an email, thinking, wait a minute, do I actually know that? Like, is that, am I saying something that's actually true? And I probably should have done that before this, but it seems more important now when somebody else might read that and think, take from that their own conclusions. So, yeah. And one thing I want to say too, since I've unmuted myself, is that I find myself trying to check my political perspective when I see new information. I say, wait a minute, that's my, like, how I think about the world coming into this rather than the information itself. So thank you. Mayor Cape of Amity, what would you like to tell people in your community? And thank you for sharing the interior of your wonderful bus with us.
Yeah, I get my work schedule is we work 2 weeks from home and then 1 week in the office. And my office is our mobile emergency command center for Salem Keizer Public Schools. And I'm actually stationed at our food warehouse where they're making all the lunches and breakfast that they send out to the kids in Salem Keizer schools. So it's kind of the hub of a lot of activity for the school district. You know, I just looking at the questions that you posed there, Casey. You know, I think the number one thing that our citizens can continue to do is just be patient. You know, follow the guidelines, follow the instructions, stay home as much as possible, and help continue to keep this virus at bay as much as possible. I think we've done a good job of keeping it fairly contained in Yamhill County and in the city of Amity, and we just need to continue that and not get complacent, especially as we hear talks of lessening restrictions at some point in the future. But we need to stay diligent in that. And then parks, you know, that's a great great comment that you had. You know, what about parks and open spaces? And unfortunately, our park in Amity is and has been closed for a long time because it's unsafe. There was a tree that came down and damaged a large structure, the main structure in our park. And the good news is we're expecting to open the bids tomorrow on the replacement of that structure. And you know, so our plan is to be able to move forward with that and get that rebuilt sometime finished with construction in July. And our insurance, those that know CIS insurance, we had a great policy. It's not going to cost any out of pocket for the city, complete replacement of that structure. So that'll be a great thing to look forward to this summer, maybe when some of those restrictions do get lifted a little bit. And then if you are social distancing and walking around town, you'll notice that Amity was a recipient of $100,000, a small city allotment from ODOT. And one good thing with the economy right now is we're able to do a lot more construction than we were anticipating, and with road construction, and we got a lot done with that money, and they did it very quickly. And so that's all now completed. And we got, I want to say, like 6 different stretches of road paved and fixed up. And so go walk around town, get a little exercise, stay away from people, and see how good things are starting to look. So that's what I got. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Mayor. That's some good news in your community, and I appreciate it. And now I know a little bit more about your space behind you. Mayor Hill from McMinnville, what would you like to tell people in the community that the business leaders here haven't already shared? And I know that you have a lot, so
Well, and much of that has been covered, Casey. It's good to see everyone. I surely appreciate the opportunity to be on the call with you. I think the first thing this morning at the League of Oregon Cities conference call, which is just power packed with a lot of good people from the governor's office. If I'm not mistaken, they indicated that we're looking at about 16% unemployment right now, with that going up. They talked about the executive order of last week. It gives us more time with the budget and the meeting law, and so that we can make sure that we have public input into the budget that we're putting together. I can tell you the league has done a survey, and in talking to a number of cities throughout the state, the consensus is that there's going to be about a 25% shortfall in revenue this year for cities, just to give you kind of an idea of what's being looked at from that perspective. So there's a lot of sharpening of the pencils as we go through that process. Joya shared a little bit about the stable table in McMinnville that's trying to put together some business relief and some support. And we're a bit slower, but we're looking for a partner, and we're looking for grants. And we've been with the USDA, and that didn't fit the criteria. We're now looking at the Oregon Oregon Foundation, and we're looking at two different things. One that would be more of a regional with the COG, which would include Marion, Polk, and Yamhill County. It doesn't give us as much direction as we want to do. The other piece would be with the McMinnville Downtown Association that fits the criteria. And so Dave is working really hard on that and working with that group to come up with a program of support. I think the last thing that I'd like to share is a report that we received from Sonia this morning and the Oregon Emergency Management System. And they're putting a lot of focus into working with FEMA with supply chain to make sure that groceries and the critical elements continue to flow. And that's really, really important with the transportation, the trucking, and the supply chain that keeps us going and doing the things that we need to do. So I think that's what I would have for today's meeting. So thank you all. And again, as we move to this possibly re-gearing up, I think it was the governor that says that we truly need to understand what physical distancing is, because as we open a few things, they're concerned there's a tendency that there's not the need for distancing. And for quite a little while now, we need to distance, we need to clean our hands, and we need to be cognizant of that. So I'll end with that.
Great, thank you very much, Mayor. Any last thoughts? All right, I really appreciate everybody being here, and I remind everybody in Yamhill County who's out there that the people arrayed here and the people who were on the call earlier are working for you every day. We have a lot of information, and we'd love to share it with you. And I want to remind people that, as Mayor Hill and as Mayor Witoski both said, we still need to be, Mayor Cape, we still need to be conscious to keep our numbers down. There's a lot going on out there. You got to trust the people you have good information from, and we're here with you, and we will get through this. Just like Mayor Witoski said. Thank you, everybody, and we'll see you on Tuesday.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.